student. Welcome to all of you in this course Understanding Gender and Law, BGS 001. Today we are going to discuss this topic, Construction of Gender and Sexualities Part 1. As you know this debate which emerged on sexuality is quite complex, and sexuality is something is socially constructed. Now, notion of what is natural and what is unnatural is often came into play when talking about sexuality and sexual desires. These ideas, quote unquote natural and quote unquote unnatural, are often used to describe sexualities which are not normative in nature. Therefore, it's important to understand what are the objectives here. The objective of this lecture is to know the concept sexuality, to understand the social construction of sexuality. A central aspect of being human throughout life encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, pleasure, intimacy and reproduction. Sexuality is experienced and expressed in thought, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitude, values, behaviors, roles, and relationship. And you can notice that in everyday life again. While sexuality can include all of these dimensions, not all of them are always experienced or expressed. Sexuality is influenced by interaction of the biological, psychological, social, economic, political, cultural, ethical, legal, historical, and religious and spiritual factors. And this is a definition which taken from World Health Organization draft, working definition draft, which was published in October 2002. So let us try to know about the social construction of the sexuality through case study. And I'm mentioning here the case study. Read and reflect upon the following case studies, because case study help us to understand the debates which are quite complex in nature. And let me read out for you the case study here. My name is Anupama. I love food. I am hard pressed to see that what I like the most. Okay, I must. My list of favorites is topped by Golgappas. For those of you who might not have had the pleasure of eating Golgappas, these are something that friend round balls of the flour filled with things like boiled chickpeas, bits of boiled potato, and spicy flavored water. And if you were to ask me what I hate most, is chicken biryani. It's one of the few things I don't like because of my experience in Hyderabad. It was here, in fact, that I tasted chicken biryani or any kind of meat for that matter 2 years ago when I moved to Hyderabad from Ajmer. As a child, I was never allowed to eat non-vegetarian food. My two brothers and my father ate meat, but my mother did not. And neither did she let me, even though we are Kshatriyas and eating meat is not a taboo. My mother cooked meat at home, but she did not eat it herself. I must mention that we all of us knows that the food habits, it has also sort of correlation with the identities and the location of the people. Nor, as I said, did she let me eat it. I have grown up feeling really angry and resentful about this. When I got a job and moved to Lucknow, I was 25 years old at that time. One of the first things that I did was to start eating meat. I made a friend there, and her name was Pushpa. She cooks amazing food, especially her chicken korma is out of the world. However, I realize I don't like tandoori chicken. It seems dry and tasteless to me. God knows how so many people carve for tandoori chicken. We normally eat at every other house. However, whenever she makes tandoori chicken, I go out and eat idli, dosha, bread curry, kebabs, etc. In Lucknow, I discovered the joys of bread curry. I could not bring myself to eat it initially, and it was a bit of an acquired taste, but now I just love it. What would my mother think of that? I wonder. Now, let us reflect upon, some of the issues which are there in the following manner. It is commonly held that taste in food is a biological, natural, instinctual, and fixed. Having read Anupama's stories, would you agree or disagree? And why? I mean, what I'm trying to ask you is that you raise this question to yourself. Perhaps in your answer, you might agree that taste in food is strongly influenced by gender, caste, class, religion, region. And then, therefore, one would say that it is socially constructed. At home, Anupama could not eat meat because of her gender. Her brothers and father could because they are men. They might not have been non vegetarian if they were Brahmins. It was because Anupama shifted to Lucknow that she was exposed to different kinds of cuisine and she could try out different kinds of food. Anupama started eating meat at the age of 25. Also, at first, Anupama was reluctant to even try bread curry and then began loving it. Therefore, we can say that Anupama is diverse. And she's, in this story, she's letting also that, she really liked it that. And some people may not like it, so she's using that. Some might hate this, um, but this is what her take she's expressing. So there are many things that Anupama loves to eat. Pushpa loves tandoori chicken, however, Anupama does not. Has positive and negative dimensions to this debate? We have to think that. Anupama loves food. It has been a source of enjoyment and discovery for her because she's inventing new food as she shifted to a new city. We also know that as a girl, Anupama was very upset that she was not allowed to eat meat. This was an act of discrimination that she resented. Anupama has experienced food in terms of both an enhancement and reduction of her sense of well being. So, you might wonder why you are having to read and analyze Anupama's food habits in such detail, or perhaps you have already guessed. Now, the question which we have to ask here, do you see any similarities between the dimension that you have explored about and with sexuality? Well, it could well be it could be argued that everything that can be said about taste in food holds true for the sexuality. Now let us replace what we wrote about for taste in food with sexuality and see whether this is indeed so. Now let's try to understand again this debate. Sexuality is strongly influenced by gender, class, caste, religion, and region. And as I already mentioned to you, it is socially constructed. It is not fixed, but change, and it is fluid, it is diverse, and as I mentioned to you that it also has a different kind of, you know, negative and positive sort of notes. So what shapes our sexual desire, who we attracted to, and how we attain sexuality in various forms, individual or unindividual. Generally, it is assumed that attraction can only happen between men and women. However, since desire is fluid, attraction can happen between any two individuals. For instance, sexual attraction can happen between two women or between two men too. So, the forms of desire are varied. It is not about who you are attracted to, but what kind of desire you feel. This might be because this kind of sexual act is linked to reproduction and progeny, even though we know that um, you know sexual desire is also for the reproduction, but also for the pleasure and desire. Men should wear white shirt and black pants. Tell me, how would the world look? Isn't it boring? And I would again urge the student to go and have a reading of Judith Butler's work here. From the above description, it is quite evident that sexuality has positive and negative aspect. However, the positive aspect maybe actually it is important to understand that we should not be scared of diversity but should accept it objectively. Now, one of the again point raises through this debate is the pain and pleasure. What are the terms which come to your mind when you think about the word sexuality? Love, desire, sexual pleasure, sexual orientation, shame, taboo, pain, sexual violence, rape, hesitation, rules, norm, societal sanction, etc. So there are a number of things which has come up. From the above description, it is quite evident that sexuality has both positive and negative aspects. However, the positive aspect, like for example, the instances of the desire and pleasure are hardly talked about. Mostly, sexuality is talked about in the context of pain and violence. But it is important to acknowledge the positive aspect or the pleasure part of the sexuality as well. According to Gail Rubin, for some people, sexuality may not be as serious as more critical problems of poverty, war, disease, racism, famine, or nuclear annihilation. Sexuality is also fluid and can change, though not on regular basis, but desires around the sexuality. So it's again been important to understand the socially constructed this idea. We read earlier that what we ate, how we eat, who can eat what, why we eat, are all the socially constructed. Similarly, with regard to the sexuality also, there are norms which prove that sexuality is also socially constructed. In considering the argument that sexuality is socially constructed, it might be useful to understand that who, how, when, whom, and why we desire all strongly subjected to the social influences. There are well-defined social norms related to all those dimensions of sexuality. So then it's important that you know how sexuality is socially constructed with whom. In terms of who is meant to experience desire, once again the reproductive logic prevails. Often those who are outside reproductive age are earlier considered to be asexual, or their sexual desire are considered to be unacceptable or inappropriate. Linked to the reproductive logic is the view that denies people with disabilities the validity of their sexual desire. I mean, you can see that the movie, Margaret Whitstock, and in which that this description is given by the film director. So, caste, class, religion. In certain parts of the country of a different Gotras, and there's also been a subcaste. So, desire is also meant to be experienced between men and women, preferably of the same caste, class also. When or after marriage, the relationship outside the institution of marriage are not accepted and it's not considerable respectable as it is associated with human reproduction. While it would be difficult to argue that the Victorian idea of the, quote unquote, sex only for reproduction still holds true. Nevertheless, the reproductive logic persists and grants high degree of legitimacy. In fact, in many contexts, the word sex is used interchangeably with heteronormative sex. In the Indian context, other sexual acts tends to be stigmatized. Why? The reason why sex is allowed is, of course, for the reproduction and progeny, and it is for pleasure is considered the privilege again. So these are some of the sexual norms that seek to govern who, how, when, and why we experience sexual desires. Those who are perceived as breaking these norms are punished and their rights violated. For instance, gay men are harassed by the police, older people who are sexually active are ridiculed, younger people is sexually heavily policed, heavily policed. Women who initiate sexual interaction are called sluts. Lesbian women are forced to get married. And adherences to the sexual norm is also sought to be ensured through the process of internalization of these norms. An important means of maintaining these norms related to sexuality are processes of socialization, which makes our sexual behavior and responses seems natural. Although the desires might be experienced as perhaps the most spontaneous and deepest expression of who we call our sexuality is again socially constructed. So let me, conclude by saying that it's very important to understand the concept of sexuality, which is very complex in nature. And I cited this example of the case study of the Anupama to make you understand that, it is something sexuality, the, whole category of the sexuality, sexual desire, how, this shift happen, how it is a fluid, how, the Victorian morality, which, acts, how, class, caste, region, religion, subcaste also, plays a significant role because again sexuality is a social construction, and I would in fact ask the student to read the books as I already mentioned Butler's book, which is a difficult complex also, but you can always begin with that book to understand this. Thank you.